Rijksmuseum, the Royal Museum of the Netherlands, is a place worth visiting Amsterdam for. With some of the most famous paintings created by Rembrandt van Rijn or Johannes Vermeer, it has one of the most fantastic collections of Dutch Golden Age paintings in the world. It's also a place where you can see how life in Amsterdam and some of its canal houses looked like. You can learn why Amsterdam was one of the most important cities in the world back in the 17th century, and can also find many origins of today's liberal Dutch society. In this first video about the Rijksmuseum, I'm going to tell you more about its beautiful building and about some of its very famous paintings. However, I'll show you the work of the four of my favorite painters from the Dutch Golden Age, Rembrandt, Vermeer, Jan Steen, and Frans Hals, in the second Rijksmuseum video that's going to be completely dedicated to them. The Rijksmuseum was founded in 1885 as a Royal Museum of the Netherlands, and it's quite interesting because it was built as a museum. You can definitely see that still today in its architecture. Look at the statues behind me, look at the wall decorations. The building itself is telling you a lot about Dutch history and Dutch art. We can probably spend the whole day just walking around the building, and I can tell you about all the little details here, but of course we won't have time for that. But probably some of my favorite details in the architecture itself are those beautiful tulips you can see on a fence here. Tulips, the symbols of the Netherlands, are of course here at the Rijksmuseum as well. Rijksmuseum was built at the edge of the 19th century Amsterdam. One of the requirements for its architect was to building serve as a symbolical entrance to the city. And you can still see today. Rijksmuseum is probably the only museum in the world with a road running through it. Just imagine the end of the 19th century with all the horses and carriages passing through these gates. Inside the tunnel, there is a metal panel at the ceiling. As a measure of precaution, in 1934, an emergency exit was created. In case of fire, they could easily pull paintings out of the building without getting them out of their frames. And they have put it below the most famous painting in the Rijksmuseum, Rembrandt's Night Watch. Interior of the museum is equally beautiful. With a combination of traditional Dutch bricks and the glass roof, it feels much more modern than its exterior. Rijksmuseum is home to around 1 million objects. You'll probably need a few days, if not even weeks, to see everything. Special collections and medieval art are on the ground floor. '18th and the 19th century art is on the first floor. This is where a small selection of Van Gogh's work is, but also the Hague School and some really lovely paintings created by Dutch Impressionists. 20th century art is located on the third floor. Among the other exhibits, you can see there the oldest aircraft in the Netherlands, preserved in an authentic condition. But the most important part of the museum is its second floor, where the art from the 17th century is located. This is where you'll find paintings made by Rembrandt, Vermeer, Frans Hals, and other famous Dutch painters from that time. If you have only a couple of hours to spend at the Rijksmuseum, I would go there straight away and explore that part of the museum only. I'm going to do the same in this video. This is the Great Hall, one of the most beautiful galleries at the Rijksmuseum. Its walls are decorated with wall paintings, giving a great overview of Dutch history. One of them is covered with stained glass windows, in which you can recognize some famous painters, writers, and architects. However, behind these doors is where the most interesting collection of the Rijksmuseum is. This is the Gallery of Honor, where you can see some of the most beautiful paintings from the 17th century, from the Dutch Golden Age. So come with me and let's take a look at the paintings. The Gallery of Honor is where the most famous paintings at the Rijksmuseum are located. Even before the museum was built in 1885, they already had a collection of paintings. The Gallery of Honor was reserved for those most famous Dutch 17th century painters. You can actually see their names written on the walls. And you can see how the architecture is almost guiding you itself, from the work of those painters to the masterpiece of the time, the Night Watch painted by Rembrandt. But let me tell you first a bit about the Golden Ages and why it's such an important part of Dutch history. What's so interesting about these paintings is that you can actually see the first secular art. So the Netherlands is experiencing its golden ages during the 17th century. A famous canal belt of Amsterdam was built during that time. So majority of the canal houses in Amsterdam were built during the golden ages. Their owners were furnishing their houses. They were also commissioning paintings for their houses. And actually majority of the paintings you can see here in the Rijksmuseum were first displayed in some of those canal houses. So if you are taking a walk around Amsterdam, you can see places, you can see original homes of some of those paintings. At the beginning of the 17th century, the Netherlands is getting its independence, and it's becoming the only republic in Europe at that time. Many of its citizens became quite wealthy because of the international trade that was flourishing in the city. Amsterdam was one of the most important ports at the time. It was quite a liberal society. Women were largely involved in a business, and the majority of them could read. Those free, wealthy, and well-educated people were interested in very specific themes on the paintings. You won't see here many religious paintings or portraits of kings and queens, something that was hugely popular in the rest of Europe at that time. But you'll see the life of those middle-class people. You will see their portraits, their children, the food they were eating, interiors of their houses, and landscapes of their country. These are some of the first middle-class secular paintings in European art. If I would need to show you only one painting today, it would definitely be one of those still lifes. You can see both the style in art very well in them, and you can also learn a lot about the people that were living in the Netherlands during the 17th century. So of course the style in art during the 17th century in the Netherlands was definitely the realism, and you can see it so well on this painting. So look at the details, look at that lemon, look at all the fine lines here. You can see how they are focusing on details on those paintings, on the colors. Look at the colors here, you can see earth pigments, earth colors, a bit muted colors as well. And then the third element, which was definitely very important for the realism, was the light. And you can see almost an obsession with light on many of those paintings. So look, for example, that jar we have here, you can see a reflection of a window, of a source of light here. You can also see it here on the glass, where you can see a reflection of the window, but also a reflection on the table. So those three elements are definitely important for the realism during the 17th century. However, you can also learn a lot about the people that were living during that time, and especially about the food that they were eating. So you can see some very expensive food here on the table, like for example these oysters we have here, or some food that was exported from the south of Europe, like grapes, olives, or lemon over here. You can also see connections with America, with the New World, and you can see a large turkey they're also having here on the table. However, that turkey, those oysters, are not the most expensive food on the table, and actually the one which is the most luxurious is here on that little plate, where you can see spices. Having a pepper on your table during the 17th century was definitely showing how wealthy you are. The price of a pepper during the 17th century was equal to a price of a gold, so you can just imagine how wealthy those people were. However, in the same time, you can also see that half-built lemon here on the table. And it's here not only because it was a part of their meal, but it was also a symbol, and it's here to remind them to stay humble. So painter is telling to them, okay, now you have all this beautiful food on your table. You're obviously doing very well, but just remember that one day you will go to another world, and then someone will ask you and judge you about how are you behaving on this one. So that's why very often on all of those Dutch still lifes from the 17th century, you're going to see a pepper, but also a half-built lemon. However, you can also learn a lot about a way of dining from that time. So maybe you already noticed that on every single one of those paintings, you will see only one knife on a table right here, and then you can also see only one knife here on this painting. People were actually eating with their hands during that time, and it was very common if you would be invited to someone else's house for a dinner to bring your own cutlery with you. It was something very expensive. It was very often custom made for you, so you would come with your own cutlery to a dinner. However, very often the only piece of cutlery was a knife, so people were actually eating with their hands. They would just cut the cheese, cut the bread with a knife, but then they would eat with their hands during the rest of the dinner. So you can imagine their hands being very greasy, very oily, but then for that reason, we have a very specific design of glasses. Look at the glass holder, you can see it here, but then also on this painting over there, you can see that round decoration on a holder, and it's here to prevent slippering of a glass to your greasy hands. This is one of the most famous Dutch landscape paintings. Of course, those landscape paintings showing the Netherlands are becoming more and more popular during the 17th century. And in all of them, they wanted to show their country. That's why they're looking for certain symbols with which they're going to show the Netherlands. You can see a lot of water on it because, of course, they were struggling with water from the very beginning. You can also see that huge windmill, something which is definitely recognized as a symbol of the Netherlands today. By the time, you can see which element is becoming the most important symbol of the Netherlands. It's that gray cloudy sky. On average, in Amsterdam, there are more than 250 rainy days per year. And of course, they're showing that on the landscape paintings as well. That sky is becoming so important with the time that later on you can see paintings looking like that small one over there, where the horizon is getting very low, and then majority of the painting is reserved for the cloudy sky. This is one of the most unusual paintings here in the Rijksmuseum, the one of the threatened swan. You can almost feel the fear of the swan when you are looking to the painting. You can also see that realism I was mentioning before so well. Look to how many different shades of gray you can see here on the body of the bird. You almost want to touch it, it looks soft. You can also feel the light coming through the winds. You can also feel that gesture, that power of the bird here so well. Well, when you would look closer to the painting, you can actually see the details and you can understand what's happening on it. And here, you can see a dog's head. So you can see a dog that frightens that swan. And then if you would look closer here, you can see the nest with the eggs, and you can see that the swan was just protecting his eggs. There are many more beautiful paintings displayed here at the Gallery of Honor. You can see pictures created by Rembrandt, Vermeer, and other famous painters in my second Rijksmuseum video. Besides the paintings, on the second floor of the Rijksmuseum, you can also see furniture and objects that were decorating many of those lovely canal houses in Amsterdam. It's also where probably one of the most beautiful museum libraries is located. If after your visit you would like to learn more about some of the paintings you've just seen, you can come here and read more about them. These dolls' houses weren't children's toys during the 17th century. They were a piece of furniture in Dutch houses at that time. They were custom made and furnished by their owners. It was quite an expensive hobby to have, because those little figures cost a lot. You can see how the rooms in which some of those paintings we've just seen at the Gallery of Honor look like, and the typical layout of canal houses. At the room next to it, you can see another exciting collection of the Rijksmuseum. The factory of fine porcelain in Delft was founded during the 17th century. Since then, it's producing recognizable white and blue objects. People living in those canal houses in Amsterdam during the 17th century would never put their tulips in vases. Instead, they had these beautiful pyramids that were filled with flowers. Rijksmuseum is filled with unusual objects, exotic art, and beautiful paintings. But the most acclaimed paintings it's home to were created by one of the most famous painters of all times, Rembrandt van Rijn. You'll learn more about him in the second Rijksmuseum video. Thanks for watching my video. If you have any questions, put them in comments and I'll answer them. If you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel so you won't miss any of my future museum videos.